This week on Tinfoil Tuesday, I am doing something which I have never done before. Responding to a podcast. The podcaster in question is a man who calls himself the medical medium. And his podcast is on chemtrails. Hello all and welcome along to another episode of Tinfoil Tuesday with me, Simon Dan. Thank you very much for joining me. Before we begin today, a huge thank you to the sponsors of today's video, CuriosityStream, the best place to find and watch documentaries about science, history, technology, nature, travel, and so much more. CuriosityStream has exclusive award-winning films and shows that you can't watch anywhere else. Plus, the deepest collection of the best documentaries from around the world. Deeper than any other streaming service out there. You could think of it as the Hulu for history buffs or the Disney Plus for the scientist in all of us. CuriosityStream adds new shows every week and is one of the very best deals in streaming. Available worldwide to watch on all of your favourite streaming devices, on the web, on TV through Roku, Xbox, Smart TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and more, plus all your mobile devices. Now, if you're into space like me, then you'll be very interested to hear that I have just finished watching Building the James Webb Telescope, a fascinating story about the new telescope told by the scientists who built it. You really should check that one out. Go to curiositystream.com/SimonDan or scan the QR code for unlimited access to the world's top documentaries and non-fiction series. And for Simon Dan fans, use the code SimonDan for 25% off. It's already one of the most affordable and best deals in streaming. So click the link below or go to curiositystream.com/SimonDan and save 25% now. Right, back to today's video where we're looking at a podcast from a man who calls himself the medical medium. Now, he claims to have the ability to converse with the spirit of compassion, a spiritual entity that gives him state-of-the-art medical advice to help people with all their ailments. Now, his podcast started with an episode on chemtrails, with all the information obtained from his good friend's spirit of compassion. Let's join him as he starts his talk, shall we?
My first experience with chemtrails was as a child, and a friend of mine pointing out a contrail on the horizon, and my friend asking, "What does your spirit say about this contrail?" And that's what he said. I said, well, let me ask Spirit of Compassion. What is a contrail?
So just for clarity, do you ask this spirit like you would ask a normal person, or do you have to meditate or anything like that? Just out of interest.
And Spirit of Compassion said, there are contrails and there are man-made poison trails, where man is poisoning man.
And I'm sure the Spirit of Compassion has evidence for this, yes? Now, of course, here in reality, we know that there are contrails. And that's it. A contrail is a condensation trail caused by the exhaust of aircraft engines formed due to the low temperatures at altitude. Now, just for clarification, chemtrails are not cloud seeding, a genuine attempt at making clouds more susceptible to produce precipitation.
These are two entirely different things. Ever since then, I was intrigued. In fact, I was obsessed about it. Why on earth would man be poisoning man?
An excellent question. And the answer, of course, is that we wouldn't. And by the way, the human population has women too in it.
Now, there's a big difference between a contrail and what people have named now a chemtrail. So, hey, I learned it as man-made poison trails. That's what Spirit of Compassion said. And now I guess they're called chemtrails. And it's a good name for them too. I like that name. I do. Contrails are fuel burning and heat exchanging from a plane. It's this heat coming out of engines.
Well, he can't even get what a contrail is correct, but there's definitely chemtrails.
Okay, so when you're entering a higher altitude, and you got that fuel burning, emitting all of that different vapor. And that air is cool as that plane is rising. And you can see these contrails out there. Yeah, there's this little tiny streak. And you see mostly contrails in the fall, contrails in the winter, on the horizon of the night sky, right? On the other hand, a chemtrail is something sinister.
Now, it's interesting to me that these chemtrail believers understand that contrails exist and are a thing. But what differentiates a contrail from a chemtrail then? Now, our esteemed host at this point goes on a little detour and talks about history. So we are going to rejoin him as he actually starts to talk about the planes. Let's have a listen.
Before we go further, though, we will talk about those planes we see in the air. So now there's airliners, right? Hey, they have passengers. You guys have been on those planes before. They got passengers. You're flying up there. And then there's cargo planes, and they might have a couple of passengers on there, but they have, packages and shipments and carrying packages all around the globe. But there's another kind of large plane up there. Spirit of Compassion told me about it. It's separate from the other two kinds of planes I just mentioned. These are older airliners. They're older airliners. These airliners are from the late 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s.
The 50s to the 90s. Airplanes between 30 and 70 years old. Are you sure about that?
These different kind of planes, people used to travel in them. Yeah, airliners is what they were, but not anymore. They fly with no passengers on there anymore. Those days are over. They travel on their own flight patterns, and they land in private airports, their own private airports. These private airports aren't military. They have nothing to do with any world military. And you know what's really weird? They have nothing to do with any world governments.
So these really old planes are working out of airports that the world's government and military know nothing about, and they're spraying chemicals in the sky from these airports. Bearing in mind that salt can be considered a chemical. See how ridiculous this is all sounding?
It's a whole other organization built for the chemical industries. And, I should have my flashlight shining on my face right now as we sit around the campfire. Get ready for the information, though.
Is that because it's all just a story?
These old planes were hollowed out. Tanks were put inside of them. And not the tanks that are theorized now. Not the tanks because, people talk about there must be tanks in these planes, right? But these tanks are large tanks. Not little tiny ones, they're large tanks. And these planes are gutted, and these large plastic tanks are installed. The tanks were filled with old chemicals and their byproducts.
That seems all very vague. What chemicals? What byproducts?
That's what happened. So the plane is sitting there. A truck comes by and then fills the plane up with these toxic waste chemicals. That's how the system works. The planes land. Once they empty the chemicals, they land. They're in the airport. Trucks come by. They fill up the tanks. Planes take off. And they go out, and they're up in the air again. So the global chemical industry was harboring for over 50 years, since before the 1960s, all these toxic chemicals that they've been holding on to. Because if they dumped everything in the rivers and the lakes and the ocean at once and in landfills throughout the whole 1900s and early 1900s, it would have been an epic disaster.
What are you blithering on about? Most toxic waste back then was disposed of in landfill sites. They didn't save it all up so they could spray it across the skies 100 years later.
So many of the chemicals were held on to and kept in storage vats. The plan was to fill these planes with these chemicals and release them when the planes are up in the sky. Is that a nice thing to do? I don't think so. The planes go high in the sky and they release these toxic chemicals. So it would slowly thin out over time as these chemicals dissipated. This isn't in just one country, okay? So if you're thinking that in your mind, you're like, whoa, what country he's talking about? No. A global phenomenon, a global deal. The planes are flying all over the entire planet, dropping down these chemicals.
And I'm sure the evidence for this is about to be produced. I mean, a man like you who gets his information from a made-up invisible friend would absolutely produce evidence. What am I saying?
And chemical byproduct. These old storage vats of chemicals that all these chemical industries had sitting around too long. Something happens to these chemicals when they sit around too long. On another note, things grow inside of them. Strange forms of bacteria, strange forms of mold, fungus, toxic algae. And that's something you got to remember as we go through this show. Toxic algae.
I think someone's been playing too much The Last of Us.
But what you see is not what you get up there in the sky. When you look at the chemtrails in the sky, you might be thinking, oh, wow, that chemtrail now he's talking about. That chemtrail is going to fall on me. I see that one right up there. That one's going to fall on me. Hey, look, there's another one right there. Hey, look, there's 10 over there. Those chemtrails are going to hit me now. No, this is a good piece of information to know. The chemtrails you see are not coming down on you. They're not.
Just as contrails don't come down on you either. Funny that.
If you can see it, it's not coming down on you. They're coming down on somebody else miles away.
Of course he would have just said that. Why would a contrail, which are ice crystals formed from the exhausts of engines, fall to the surface of Earth when they would have evaporated long before getting there?
The chemtrail that comes down on you, you can't see. It's already come down. It's already been heading down and comes down. They float through the sky and they dissipate and they drop miles after miles after miles and they fall down on somebody else, the ones you see in the sky anyway. So the planes, they drop these chemical soups all day, all night, nonstop, but nonstop. All night, all day, all night, all day. Chemical byproducts are forever being produced by the chemical industry. If you're wondering what byproduct I'm talking about, it's endless, really. I mean, it's endless. So many things that are man-made out there.
Yeah, I mean, why be specific? Just say it's endless. It'd be like going into a restaurant and asking the waiter for a menu and he says, oh, it's fine, it's just endless. The food's endless, buddy. Put your arm out and you'll just grab something.
Everything man-made produces chemical byproduct from many industries, including the petrochemical industries throughout the world, the entire world. The byproduct is highly toxic, and it can't be dumped in the ocean, like I said, in one shot. You dump all this in the ocean in one shot, you guys, and the ocean's dead. That's it. The whales die. Everything dies.
Mining companies alone dump 220 million tons of hazardous waste into the ocean every year. So, yeah. Clearly Mr. Medical Medium doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, he can blame it on his mate the spirit, but he still shouldn't be repeating it, should he? Right, well there we go, a fascinating look at the medical medium and his insight into chemtrails there. We will definitely be coming back and seeing what his YouTube channel has to offer in the future. In all seriousness though, claiming to be able to talk to a spirit that gives you medical advice to help cure people's ailments is pretty dangerous. Right, well there we go. Thank you so much for watching for another Tinfoil Tuesday. It truly is appreciated. We're all done and dusted. If you enjoyed it today, please do consider subscribing to the channel. And if you really enjoyed today's video in particular, hit that like button too. If you do want me to do more on this medical medium guy, then let me know in the comments. Just enough time to once again thank CuriosityStream for sponsoring today's video. Remember, click the link in the description or go to curiositystream.com/SimonDan and get 25% off now. I've been Simon Dan. Have yourselves a great week, and I'll see you on Friday for the return of one of the smartest flat earthers, Taboo Conspiracy. Can't wait. See you then.